Also at that moment realized like, oh, I want to make t-shirts for the rest of my life. I was literally on GoDaddy in the U-Haul buying SwooshFrankOcean.com and like, just like I'm making plays, woke up the next morning, 50K in sales. If you can unlock that, you will be, selling them product forever. The idea of you can do it too, instead of just do it. I just wanted to make product for everyone. Fanning the cash out. We were just like, yo, this is crazy. Waking up, my phone's vibrating. I guess I was like, holy shit, and I almost wanted to cry.
But I'm a yellow guy. You know where I'm going with this. You can use Chinatown, right? What was your idea and your thought process of like getting rid of that name? Was it the right move?
Man.
All right, guys. So we got a legend in the building, Mikey Merchandise. A lot of people don't know that name, right? Where does that name come from?
In high school, I got expelled from my class for basically selling and distributing t-shirts on campus. It was, I don't know, one of those silly moments. I made a shirt, brought it to school, started selling it to all the kids. The kid that I used for the graphic didn't get a shirt. He ended up fighting a kid for it. I ended up getting called to the principal's office. My parents got involved. It was just a whole thing, but at that moment, that's when I kind of got that moniker of Mikey Merchandise. And I kind of like, also at that moment realized like, oh, I want to make t-shirts for the rest of my life. Like I had always looked for something that was actually meaningful for me, and making product was the first time that I had made something that made people feel something. And I think that was like that aha moment that we all look for in life, is like when you can make someone feel something or do something or, just get excited, like then you've finally broken that code of like, oh, I could do this and this could be me.
Well, was that the first experience where you felt like something you created made somebody feel a certain way?
Yeah, just to get called in the principal's office for something that you created, right? And like for people to like be proud to have worn it, or like asking you what you're wearing, and having like that visceral feeling, because like we all know as a kid, like you get a new pair of basketball shoes and like you put them on in the store, and all of a sudden your mom's like, go run, and you like run and you feel like you're going really fast, or like, oh man, I touched the top of the door, like I'm gonna dunk one day, like that feeling being packaged into a product and being able to achieve that is like one of the holy trinities of making clothes, and it's if you can do that through a product and give someone a feeling, like that's the ultimate, right?
That's like, I guess that's the designer's way of feeling like accomplished.
Yeah, because, I think that there's something to be said about making something cool, but like to make something that someone feels something for or gets excited about, like that's why like things like the Smiley basketball, it's like, it's a product that will make you smile. And I think that at the core is like a thing that if you can unlock with the thing you create, then you have a product that will kind of live a lot longer than you.
How many products did you make that didn't make anyone feel like anything before you got to that point?
So many, like my first run of t-shirts, like I remember like I made them, I had like a logo tee, I had this random graphic. Dude, it was like a just random logo that I made. I had this designer, Rob Doby, that I loved. He had a brand called Full Bleed that I saw on like MySpace back in the day. And like, he was part of that like Johnny Cupcakes universe. And I was like emulating all of his work. I was like, oh, I love how he's doing these like silhouette kind of graphics. And so I kind of took it upon myself to be like, I'm going to create my own versions of what he does. And, it's like, I think almost starting off with like, monkey see, monkey do, and like I was just trying to recreate the stuff that I loved. And then like once I was able to do that, and I taught myself the Adobe suite, and you just like step by step, then it was like, cool, I'm going to Office Depot, I'm buying the the printer paper, and I'm starting to create t-shirts out of my garage. And like my dad worked in fashion as like in sales and girls denim, and my mom was like a designer back in the day, but as a kid I rejected all of that because I was like, oh, this is like girls clothes, I don't care. But fast forward, it was like funny with them being like, don't go into the fashion industry.
Like a combination of both now.
Yeah, and it was like definitely funny for them to watch because, they both didn't want me to work in the industry, but it's now cool for them to be able to see where it's, kind of gone.
They pass the baton down and they're proud.
Yeah, I'm lucky to be able to have the creativity of my mom and kind of like the business acumen of my dad, where like, he's a true salesman at the core, and my mom is just a true creative.
What how long did it take you to like, how long was the process from going from like copycatting like other brands to like having your own voice through like the platforms of Adobe and all that stuff?
I think that like naturally, no matter what we're referencing or like, trying to recreate stuff that we saw as a kid, whether or not we acknowledge it. And so like early on, it is like, cool, I'm making cool sports graphics. I'm making these cool like indie band t-shirts that I liked as a kid and remaking that. But I think that it wasn't until I had my own like visceral experience where like, I was working at Goodwood in New York and making like wooden chains for everyone, and everyone would like email in. I was the custom chain guy. Like if you said, yo, I want to drag and dunk into basketball, like I was mocking that up, sending you an email, and then I was like making the chain, laser cutting it, and sending it to you the next day. I met this guy named Chase Infinite there, who basically was someone who became ASAP Rocky's manager. He's now Westside Guns manager. But at the time, like, I was a kid who just like was at Parsons School of Design my freshman year, and I was like bringing chains to him after work for like J Electronica or Most Def, and like I was gassed to be able to like make these chains. So on the side I was like making even more for him. I ended up getting fired for like making extra chains for this dude, but then I ended up interning for him, and that was at a time where like the whole ASAP crew was in the basement, like Action Bronson's in the back, all these people. But like as a kid, I'm just like, oh shit, like,
it's crazy.
And like I was lucky to be around all of that, and like my other boss was this Japanese guy who like put me on to selvage denim and like really showed me kind of that whole world. Like, was bringing back a Visvim, in his like suitcases and giving us all samples because he had a friend who worked there. And just those moments of like seeing something that was like executed at a really high level made me appreciate stuff in a whole different way, So
we probably sound like the old guy. Like I feel like a lot of the kids now, you probably hire a bunch of kids. They're like, they don't want to do the weeding the vinyl and all that bullshit, right? What would your advice be to that kid to get into those rooms? Because essentially that's what got you here was exposure. How did you get in those rooms?
I mean, I put myself out there. I made myself available to someone to help them. I was like, oh, you have this thing that you're trying to do. I can be a resource for that. Let me make myself available and be willing to do the work without expectation up front, and recognizing that like, to have a mentor, not an internship, but someone that you can directly work for, you can show your value, and you can actually give them value that is attainable, then you're naturally going to have that return back to you. Sure, not everyone's a good person, and everyone's going to like look out for their intern or the person who's working for them, but like I truly believe that if you put on for someone, you work hard, and like you really like, I don't know, like stick your neck out there, that you will have it in return. My mentors introduced me to awesome people, people that I still talk to today, relationships that have become, fruitful for me for a very long time. And it was because I was allowed in those rooms and in that environment, because I put myself out there and being willing to say, hey, can I work for you? But none of that happened without me like saying, hey, I'm going to put myself into these situations and I want to work here. I want to be around these environments. And, I think for any kid, it's like, you kind of need to knock that door down a little bit, because there's so many kids nowadays who just want to do this, that you got to be that much more consistent. And even in the face of not having success, continue to keep knocking that door down.
You talk about mentorship. Was there ever a time where you worked for somebody that wasn't the best mentor, or somebody that, you put on for somebody, you did all this, you brought a lot of value, and instead of getting any expectation, you got like the exact reverse? Was there any moment like that? I
mean, I'm sure there's people that I've worked with over the years, but I feel like whenever I've done the right thing, I've stepped up and I've really like helped someone, I haven't been played in that way or felt like, my value wasn't reciprocated. I think that I've had business dealings like that, or like one-off moments where like I come into a situation expecting more than what I'm going to get.
Can you break down those moments? Like a moment where you had something?
I don't know. It's just like you go and like really help someone out, and like I'm not going to use the name because I don't want to like drag anything. But it was like, I had a pretty prominent designer who's like has a New Guards brand now come to me back in the day and asked me to help him like develop hats and make some product. And I put myself out there, started making the product, I developed it all, and got it to the final thing, and then that person got that deal and basically was like, hey, I'm good, I'm out. And then, I was stuck with all these samples, all these things I had created. And then I saw those same hats come out officially through the people he had partnered with, right?
So they essentially just stole your work.
No, and like, it's not my work, right? I'm not the creative who designed it. I was just I essentially was a vendor, right? So like as a factory, I kind of actually shouldn't be pissed. It's part of the game. But at that moment, I felt like, oh no, I'm like here to help you. I put myself out there to do that. But it's also part of the game. Like not everyone's going to do right by you as a partner. You have to build these long-term relationships, and ultimately if you can bring value to someone else, then they might return it to you.
What do you think is the line of like, they always say great artist copy and amazing artist steal. What do you think is that line for you of like stealing, bootlegging, copying? Like how does that live in your brain?
I think for me, it's always been this mentality of like steal from the, like Goliath, steal from the rich and give to the poor. But like it is very Robin Hood mentality. Like I'm not trying to steal from the next brand, over as much as I'm like, hey, can I play with the luxury brands, the, major businesses out there, and have some fun with that. And I think it is ask for forgiveness, not permission. In some cases you have to knock the door down. Like I said, I think, the best example is like we made a bootleg Grateful Dead t-shirt when we first started out, and then they hit us up. It became this conversation of, what if we just do this legally and you guys just work with us, not against us? And then that led to, the Crocs partnership, that led to just like almost like a year-long moment of being able to create impactful collaborations with a license that like at the time had just kind of come into like popular conversation again, you know, and that doesn't mean that Grateful Dead hasn't been popular for the past God knows how long, but it's that like the Nike collab had just dropped, all these things, and then we literally hit right after with a Crocs drop, and it just creates these like cultural moments where now everyone's wearing Grateful Dead product, everyone's talking about it. It's like the next Thrasher t-shirt where like you have to own one if you want to be part of that cultural conversation. So it's an interesting one.
What, as a creative, like how do you maneuver through those collabs? Because I feel like creative people are really focused on like design work, being dope, being cool, right? But like when you go into these rooms with the suits, they don't give a fuck. They what's your brand deal? What's the numbers? Like, how do you navigate that as a true creative?
I think part of it is like selling. It's selling the excitement that you have, you know. But if you can't take that excitement and package it up and give someone a reason to sign up for it, then you're not going to win. But that is half of the battle. You can make a great idea, but if you can't sell it, then ultimately you're only have half the process done. And that's something that I've, you know, tried to get better at over the years, and like making sure I'm walking into those rooms with excitement. I'm getting these people really hyped about the ideas that we're trying to develop, because half of it is trying to do stuff that is disruptive and, you know, is not going to be part of their normal plan. And so a lot of times, like, you have to keep on shooting that shot. And there's been many times where, like, you know, we'll have a really awesome opportunity, huge collab moment, but like sometimes they just don't get it. And so half of it is like making these decks, making these concepts, selling the idea, and helping people who may not understand complex concepts to be like, oh, cool, I see what they're trying to do. And, you know, while everyone wants to just like do their thing, et cetera, break down the wall, like part of it is for us to like figure out how we can sell these ideas initially. And that's a forever battle, you know?
Yeah. I think one of the things as creative people is like, we always try to push the boundaries, right? Like the whole idea of like making somebody feel a certain emotion is like part of the like ethos of what we do.
Yep.
How do you, I guess, audit your line? Like when do you know that you went too far, and when do you know that it's like, oh, it's tasteful and it's good?
Well, I think the thing that people don't realize is like not everything is meant to be a, you know, viral moment product. Like we're also a clothing brand that sells seasonal collections, et cetera. So I think it's creating those kind of like fireworks moments so that the, you know, other kind of regular fire can continue to be maintained, you know, because the more that I do these firework moments or things that get you excited, come into the door to shop and want to see what we're doing, you're going to then buy the regular smiley face t-shirt or the fun product or the, you know, new drop, versus the like collaborations and other stuff that then kind of stokes that moment, gets the fire back going again. And, you know, you got to keep on satiating that thing and that machine. Otherwise, like, you know, it can start to slow down, or it can kind of have its own hiccups.
So like an example of that was I actually bought your Crocs Nike little thing. That would be like viral, making the fire, get them into the account, and then selling them a smiley face t-shirt or something like that.
Exactly, you know, and the more that you love those little moments and the ways that we create experiences ultimately, and that's like a big goal, is hoping that you're like, I love this brand, I want to tell someone else about this brand and they should experience it too. You know, and that story has changed over years. It was before, like, I used to hand the phone to 10 kids in my office and they would all create content, to then like we started creating characters in here, to then like post-pandemic, that kind of fantasy of having characters and all that like kind of went away a little bit. You know, there wasn't this like need to be sitting at home watching something else and being like, oh damn, I wish I was there. And now people were back out again, you know, and the way people were dressing, etc. All shifted, you know. And so it's been interesting to watch even what's happening in the space and how people are dressing, shopping, and, you know, all that.
What do you think is like some of the, because you've been in the space for a really long time, where do you think there are like disconnects in the space? Like where is the opportunity for like, if I connect this with this, I can become a business, or I could, you know, give them my service? Like where's the disconnect in the industry?
Well, I think that the biggest disconnect is the idea that you have to do something that is hyper cool or hyper niche for it to be respected. But it is like akin to the video, like I was saying earlier, where you're talking about gray space and recognizing the void in the market, is to be like, you can be great and not be the coolest guy out there. You can be serving these people who need something. And, you know, I literally, like, I loved that video because it was just like, that's what it's all about. It's recognizing where the gaps are, how you can serve people, how you can actually like say, okay, cool, like what do people need? And then we can actually be a solution for that. You know, it's why I think that things like the Smiley basketball kind of represent the idea of you can do it too, instead of just do it. You know, the idea that like 99% of us are never going to play pro sports. We're never going to be an elite athlete. So why is everything made to feel elite?
Wow,
why can't it just be made to be a fan? You know? And to me, like, that's where this kind of product represents that. And like, if you're just a mom who wants to get your kid into sports, well, like, you know, 9 times out of 10, your kid's not going to be good.
Yeah.
But like, at least they can love the game and it can be fun, you know? And I hate to be the guy selling here, you know, participation trophies, but like, there's a little bit of that energy and that like, that is something that needs to be served. When you walk into a Dick's Sporting Goods, like, there's not a lot of like, oh no, you could do it too. It's like all like, be the best, you know? And like, I do want to be that brand out there that can represent that. And, you know, part of it is recognizing in the brand that we created, like, oh, we have something special that doesn't need to only be housed by this streetwear brand. It can be bigger than that, and it can kind of have its own heartbeat in life.
Yeah. How did you, because I'm sure like as an early creative, you love Supreme, you love all these hype brands. You're like, dude, I want to be the hypest shit. I want to be the coolest shit, right? How did you go from that to like where you're at now and the maturity level you have now of like stomaching, like, I don't have to be the coolest guy. I can be the most accessible guy. How do you go and make that transition as a creative? I
mean, the thing is that I don't believe that I ever hit that side of it where like I was the hyper cool guy, the shit was reselling for 10x the price. Like, there was always a level of access, even with Chinatown Market, now Market, etc. Like, you know, so I think for me, even with my first brand ICNY, it was always like, I'm making this product because I want to keep people safe on a bike when they get hit by a car. Like, you know, I just wanted to make product for everyone, you know, versus for me. Because I knew that I loved acronym and, you know, Arc'teryx and Valence and all these things that naturally were not very accessible, but I loved function and performance and all of that. But like, I recognized when I did it with ICNY, it was very challenging to make a garment that's just as good as a Patagonia jacket or just as good as these things, to put it one-to-one up to it, to sell it at the same retail price, and to actually say this is just as good. You know, that game is a lot harder than like, I'm going to make you a really cool graphic t-shirt that's going to make you feel cool for the next 2 months. You know, and that experience, while, you know, it's a little bit easier, I think it's been fun to be able to explore because it's constantly changing and the target is big, small, it's, you know, moving all the time, and it's kind of fun to be able to do that versus like, hey, I'm going to have this cohort of 5,000 people who like to buy my jackets, and I'm going to hope that I can keep them on my, you know, ship long enough to keep on buying them.
You talk about like the creative target is always moving, right? As a creative person, how do you think is the best way to find that target? Like, let's say you're the 18-year-old version of yourself, you're vinyling, you're doing all this shit, and like you haven't really found your voice. How do you go, what do you tell to that kid to like, here's how you find your voice?
I mean, part of it's looking inward, you know, and like what gets you excited. Part of this has to represent like what makes you tick. And if you don't have that, then people are going to very quickly see that it's devoid of actual purpose and excitement, you know? And I think that that's half of why like there's any attraction to this from myself, is because I'm passionate about it, you know? Like, I worked at a taco shop in high school, worked at Jamba Juice. Like, I did a lot of things to be able to get to this point to do this and to be able to be here. And I know that I'm lucky to be here. You know, it's like, there's many people who want to just make clothes for a living, but to be able to do it is to wake up every day and say, I'm going to keep doing it. And I'm going to do it in the face of people saying like, you suck, this isn't good, this isn't great product, you know, like making, you know, the brand, like it took me dropping the same t-shirt over and over and over and over again for people to actually look at it as an icon, or for this basketball to become disruptive, or for, you know, like we partnered with Puma to help them launch basketball in New York, and like this Smiley basketball was over the entire space and was like the main driver. But why was a streetwear brand doing that, you know? And so I think a lot of times it's just like the continue to show up, you will almost create your own frontier in front of you without even realizing it, as long as you keep your head down and just keep that grind going. And it sounds like so cliche and etc., but like,
it's true.
You know, it is very true. I'm sure you've seen it in your business, and like, you know, you have to just keep going in the face of adversity. And like, I mean, that was the most fun that I had, you know, was building it. And, you know, having the days where I was just like, all of a sudden waking up, my phone's vibrating, I get to the office, I'm printing out like a 30-foot thing of shipping labels. And I used to do these videos where I literally like would drag the labels outside of the office and then film the whole thing. And like, just that energy of that, it just felt like gangbusters, like, oh no. And like, I'd call friends over to help pack orders, and like, it'd just be it was a moment, you know? And so every single time that any human feels that or sees that, you finally find your purpose, or you feel like, oh, I could like do this to make these people's lives easier. Like, it just makes you, it gives you that like excitement that you're looking for, you know? It's like gambling or like whatever, but like you're doing it in a positive way that affects your own life in a, you know, in a good way, and also can help make people's lives easier. And if you can find the synergy of those two things, then you have a beautiful business.
You were talking about how when you steal from like the Goliaths of the world, right? I think the premise and like the allure of Chinatown Market was like, you're bootlegging these huge Goliath companies, right? How did you feel when these Goliath companies turned around and bootlegged your shit? Because like, you saw Gucci do like Very similar aesthetic to what you were doing.
I can't knock it, it's kind of fair game, right? And like, as much as I wanted to be called to do that with them, I recognize it's part of these design codes and things that, is out there, and it's ultimately part of the game. Like, I remember back in the day when I was doing my first brand and I saw this guy, Leo Chang, who was a designer at Nike, had placed an order for one of my reflective socks. And then all of a sudden, like 3 months later, KD had a reflective lightning bolt sock that came out, right? And like those moments, I could be angry and I could say, you know what? Screw Nike. They can't come to this office. They're not welcome here. They're stealing from us, whatever. But instead, I've had Nike come to my office like 8 or 9 times in the past couple of years, where they come with like full design teams, marketing team, etc. Because ultimately, I can either tell them to screw off and like they'll never engage with me, or I can say, you know what, guys, come in here. I'm going to share how we think, and you guys can get inspired, and we'll be here when you're ready to work. And like I'd rather do that all day than to like keep my doors closed and not be willing to share.
That's the salesman in you. That's the dad in you. The mom in you is the one that comes up with the ideas. The dad in you is the one to like have the foresight to be like, you know what, I'm not going to be a fucking idiot and be like piss off because I'm going to miss out on a check or a sale or a collab.
Yeah, and just an opportunity to connect with someone, because human connection is the biggest breeder to actual opportunity. And you can be the most talented person in the world, but if you don't go put yourself out there, you're never going to be able to have an opportunity that you really want. Yeah. So
this is the last question. I don't know if you want to answer this, but I'm a yellow guy, right? You know where I'm going with this. I'm giving you the pass. You can use Chinatown, right? What was your idea and your thought process of like getting rid of that name? Like, do you think it was the right move?
Man, at the end of the day, when I started this brand, I, was inspired by t-shirt shops on Canal Street. My friend called me one day, said he wanted to make a shirt that said, "Fuck you, fucking fuck." Yeah. And that all started from really like, cool, we're going to make that t-shirt. And then I went and Vinyl Cutter made it. And then we're like, let's make a thank you, have a nice day, like the thank you bags. And then we're like, oh, you know what, let's do a smiley face one. And then we were like, we just started riffing. And then all of a sudden I had like 10 designs, and I made the Frank Ocean bootleg, all these things, and we're like, we got a little mini collection here. And then literally the next day, my friend who was at Shopify at the time, they had like 6 free booths at ComplexCon for the first show, and he's like, do you want to have a booth? And I'm like, screw it. And I literally was living with my friend who did Pleasures at the time, and they had just started Pleasures. I was going to the office with them every day, doing graphics for them, whatever. And he looked at me, he's like, do you want to just be sitting here while we go to Japan and do pop-up shops? And I was like, no, I don't. Fuck. And I was like so pissed. And that next day when I got the call for the booth, I was like, screw it, I'm going for it. Showed up with 5 t-shirts, 5 hats, set up the whole little booth. My girlfriend helped me do everything and just build it all out. And, as I was driving her to the airport to go home that night after ComplexCon, I was literally on GoDaddy in the U-Haul buying SwooshFrankOcean.com and like, just like I'm making plays, woke up the next morning, $50K in sales, my phone's just vibrating, and then like 6 hours later got a trademark infringement from Frank's team, had to return all the money. But it was those moments where like I'm like, oh, if I could do this at the speed of pop culture, maybe not break the law, I could have something special here. And like that was that first moment where I was like, oh, like post ICNY and like losing the whole company and kind of going into debt, I was just like a little bit like felt like I was screwed. I put 20K in a credit card to buy all this product, and the first day did that 20K in sales, and it was like, oh shit, I remember going back to the hotel room with my girlfriend fanning the cash out, and we were just like, yo, this is crazy. And it was like probably like like 10K in cash, which is crazy, but at the time like I was like, holy shit, and I almost wanted to cry. She fell asleep. I'm just sitting there like looking at it all like, oh man.
You're like, I'm a drug lord.
Yeah, I mean, dude, it's like you feel like you took over the world. It's like the first day you get like 20 orders or 30 orders, and I got like 3 or 4 shop orders, and the first retailers were Colette and Urban Outfitters. You know what I mean? And like that was like taboo, when I had done it. And I remember like seeing the guys who own Self Edge on Twitter being like, oh, they sold out, the brand's gonna die. And it's like, here we are, and at the end of the day, giving people access, opening the door, and being willing to let people experience your brand is so important. You can decide to make it less people, or you want to make that funnel a little bit smaller, but if you're going to do that, you got to make it the best, most rich experience you possibly can, because there's nothing like that feeling that when you were a kid, you got the jacket with the inside pocket, or the little extra thing, or the muskas with the little zipper on the tongue, like all those little feelings, and giving someone that feeling of joy. If you can unlock that, you will be, selling them product forever, and I think that's the unique thing, and the thing that everyone needs to figure out how to unlock is like giving that same feeling of joy by experiencing a thing. Things are very meaningless, but if you can make someone feel something, then you've really kind of unlocked greatness.
Last question. If you could go back to the 18-year-old version of yourself, you can tell yourself one thing, you got like 20 seconds, what are you telling yourself?
just be consistent, keep going, and you know, have fun along the way. Like, it sounds so cliche and silly, but like, you know, you got to enjoy all these times right now, because these times are going to be some of the most fun times that you have amongst it all. You know, the minute you start hitting milestones, etc., you start to realize like how much it's just another step. It's just another challenge. It's just a new version of the old thing that you had. And, you know, like, I've been lucky enough to be able to help my parents and be able to do like things that I wanted to do, right? And like, you know, I got my mom a hot tub one year for Christmas. You know, like, she still to this day uses it. She lives in the mountains of Colorado, and she calls me all the time, like, just thank you so much, whatever. Like, if I can impact my family's life and do all that kind of stuff, then I'm lucky to continue to do this every day, you know? And that's the context I need to have amongst the fun side of it of like, I make t-shirts, man. I'm printing, you know, ink on cotton. I'm making graphic basketballs. Like, I'm making novelty product. Like, it's not saving the world, you know? And like, I'm not here to talk about sustainability. If we were all talking about sustainability, then, you know, I would stop making product. Like, I think that's most people in this world. And, you know, ultimately, I just want to make stuff that makes people smile. And if I can do that till the last time I, you know, create something, then I'm happy.
Well, I appreciate it. That's going to be a wrap.
Yeah.
You know, we stay giving y'all free game.
Yes, sir.